Previously on the Younger Dryas.
After hitting this peak of warmth, look at this. Look at where this is. Now you come across here, present temperature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm through a mathematical curriculum teaching them this, and I discovered the power and importance of repetition. Mm-hmm. Well, the point is it has nothing to do with the changing climate.
And you're going to learn why in this series.
Because here's the thing. This is the kind of thing, but the Younger Dryas is a good example, and we've chosen this because it is such a good example. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The more you get into it, and the more you understand it, and the more you comprehend the details of it, the more interesting it gets. Because it is a hell of a story. Was Dryas octopetala.
How about that?
Dryas octopetala. This is a polar wildflower. So here's what he found that there was this layer of glacial deposited till, and within that there was organic remains, right? Because now he's in southern Sweden. He knows that these plants like Dryas octopetala and others are now only found in northern Sweden, and even as far as up growing on Spitsberg Island up in the Arctic Ocean. But they're not growing in southern Sweden. But here he finds them abundantly in this mass of glacial deposits. Right there, that's pretty much the disappearance of the Clovis culture.
Well, let me ask you this. What would cause such a rapid drop in global temperatures? Do we know?
See, Mike, that's so the fundamental question we're going to be asking is, what is that? As we go through this, and we're going to be sifting through the data and the evidence, we're going to be engaged in a process of forensic paleogeology or forensic paleoclimatology. We're going to be looking at evidence, trying to figure out what example, because you just asked the essential question there, Mike. That's the question that's going to be pretty much at the foundation, at the core of this whole series that we're going to do on the Younger Dryas.
Welcome to Randall Carlson's definitive work on the Younger Dryas, your comprehensive overview of climate change.
Hello everyone, we're going to be unpacking the Younger Dryas chronozone, which is what it's called in terms of the time frame in which it's generally placed, which is about 12,800, a little bit less than 12,900 years ago, down to about 11,600 years ago. Now, to dive into this class, if you want to call it that, because that's kind of what it's going to be, we're going to be putting it out in short, digestible chunks of about 20 minutes, where we cover particularly one topic that's relevant to the subject of the Younger Dryas and understanding, getting a deeper understanding of that. And so, as we do this, I'm going to be joined by my colleague, Mike Robertson, who is also the CEO and founder of HowTube. So anyways, let's just get right into it and start with where we left off, essentially, on the, if you want to call it, the pilot episode. I'm going to go ahead and open my screen here. All right. So now we will share. There we go. All right, so just to refresh ourselves. Okay, so we were looking at this slide in the first segment of this series, and I wanted to particularly call your attention to the dramatic drop that's represented by the Younger Dryas. If we go to this horizontal dashed line up here, that represents the present temperature, as it says, and we can come across, we can see this is basically where this gray line stops. That is now considered the line of demarcation between the Pleistocene, and the final event of the Pleistocene essentially was the Younger Dryas, and then the Younger Dryas gave way to what is called the Pre-Boreal, which is a stage in the Holocene. Actually, I think the correct term is a sub-stage within the Holocene, and the Holocene starts right here and runs from the end of the Younger Dryas right down to the present. I want to call your attention to the present global warming within the context of everything that's gone before through out the Holocene and preceded. But we're not here to talk about the Holocene today. We're here to learn about the event that immediately preceded the Holocene, that is that defining transition between 2.5 million years of Pleistocene and the 11,600 years of the Holocene. Now we can see here there's this amazing large spike of warming here preceding, now this is the Alarode warming, and it immediately preceded the plunge into glacial cold that is the characteristic or defining characteristic of the Younger Dryas, is this rapid plunge into full glacial cold. You can see here when we go back to the older, actually this is called the intra-Alarode cold spell. It was a very brief plunge into deep cold. You do not see the older Dryas on this graph, but there was an older Dryas that preceded the Balling Alarode, and then there was an intra-Alarode cold period. Then there was this Alarode or Alarode spike right here. Then we get to the Younger Dryas cooling. So the controversy surrounds what was the force of nature behind the transition from this up here, which, again, notice this is as high as the present temperature line, basically. So the controversy is what drove the temperature of the planet. And, of course, it was not all as severe. This is now Greenland. This is Greenland. And Greenland is recording the full extent, the extremity of this climate change. For whatever reason, North Atlantic, Greenland area, circumpolar seems to have been the most extremely affected by the Younger Dryas climate change. Anyway, so the controversy is what drove the climate from this stage up here, virtually present warming, all the way down here, virtually full glacial cold, and did it really, really quickly. You can see here this, if you look down here at the timeline on the bottom, we're looking at about 14,600. Now, there's something else that's important here. Let me tell you here. I'm enjoying a cup of organic Sumatran coffee right here. And every morning, and sometimes later in the day, I will have a cup of coffee, and I will sweeten it with about 1/2 of a teaspoon of the Pure Wave energized honey. So this is pretty much what I'm exclusively using as a sweetener now. And there's a number of reasons why I'm really enthusiastic about it. One is it's completely raw. It hasn't been heated. It's unprocessed. So it won't crystallize. Also, the fact that it's harvested from an area in Canada that's a very pristine ecosystem. So it's been independently tested. I've checked this out. It has no impurities, no glyphosate in it, which I definitely like. And as you know, we've had conversations before we ever met the 4RBs people talking about the crisis amongst bees and how important bees are to a functioning, healthy ecosystem. Almost 3/4 of the food that we eat ultimately depends on pollinization by the bees. Our friend Brent that we interviewed earlier in a Squaring the Circle told us about his work with electromagnetic fields and found that by using certain geometric configurations related ultimately to sacred geometry, interestingly, could definitely improve the life, the health and lifespan of colonies and reduce the amount of colony collapse. And then by using the same system of electromagnetic fields in this energizer, hexagonal energizer that uses magnets in a configuration, in a tree of life configuration, they found that they can actually energize the honey. And this energized honey is the stuff that I've been using, and it's seems to be really good stuff. We have been talking also in many lectures and so on, and we're going to be introducing that into our discussion here, meltwater, the melting of the glaciers. And The melting of the glaciers was clearly not a smooth, uniform curve. It was interrupted on several occasions by rapid pulses of melting and interrupted by the Younger Dryas, because the rapid melting that had been going on as the temperatures climbing up here to this spike got turned off. So whatever turned this thermal energy off, then it caused a plunge into full glacial cold. And at that point, in some cases, it looks like the melting, the recession of the glaciers paused, and in some cases, it looks like it actually regressed, and the glaciers began to grow again. Then the Younger Dryas is concluded by this second warming spike here that brings us up and out of the Ice Age. And here now we are into full Holocene warmth, and this is what's called the climatic optimum. And during the climatic optimum, global temperatures were generally warmer than they are now. Yes, I'm going to say it again, warmer than they are now. There's something very interesting within the Holocene warming period, or the climatic optimum, as it's been called, or also the hypsothermal. I think maybe that got changed, because in the early days when they were calling it the climatic optimum, that seemed to imply a favorable condition, a favorable outcome to this warming. And within the context of global warming fear campaign, you can't have any notion introduced into the discussion that might imply that there was a stage not too many thousands of years ago where it was warmer than now, and we're using the word optimum to describe that. But the climatic optimum here was interrupted by this 8,200-year cooling. Now, other graphs that I've seen actually show this cooling to be colder than now. And we're going to look at that, but within the context of what happened in the Younger Dryas, but that's not going to be our focus for the next few segments anyway. It may be, the reason it might be useful or important is because it may be a lesser extreme forcing mechanism that is also responsible for this. In other words, if we understand what this is, we might understand what this plunge is. Or vice versa. If we understand what caused this sudden plunge at about 8,200 years ago, maybe it'll give us insight into understanding this much more severe plunge that occurred with the Younger Dryas. Now let's go to the next one. Okay, we also looked at this one. This is the late Pleistocene mortality graph. This is a couple of decades old, so it's probably could be updated. But essentially, each little square block represents the finding of a fossilized faunal remain of now extinct Pleistocene, most of them megafauna, meaning larger than 100 pounds in body weight. Each of the squares, the black and the white, just indicates the context in which the fossils were discovered. We don't need to get into that now, other than to know that every little square represents an individual fossil of an extinct animal that was found. And, of course, what you see here is, right at 14,000, we see this rapid climb. We get right up here, and if we go to 12,000, we're right here. This would be about the Younger Dryas. Coming out of the Younger Dryas, which was obviously another catastrophe, at least according to the graph we were just looking at, then we'll see here, this is 10,000 years ago. Here's 11,000. Here's 12,000. So if we go up 11,000, we can see that this spike looks like it coincides very closely with the end of the Younger Dryas, 11,600 years ago. But if we were to invert this graph and juxtapose it on the previous graph, we would see how nicely the mortality spike lines up with the plunge in global temperature and the rapid recovery of that plunge that defines the Younger Dryas. And then we've got this graph, which briefly, you want to go to essentially the uniformitarian model would be like this dash line, where at the beginning of the glacier recession, or the melting away of the glaciers, essentially what you've got is a smooth continuum accelerating to this bell curve shaped dash line here, and then tapering off at essentially the same rate that the melting discharge volumes increase to this peak right here, which you can see if I come down, that's peaking. It looks like around 10,000, 10,000, 11,000 years ago. But we got these, but that's not the real graph of the recession of the Great Glacial System. What you've got is two spikes here. Now, the range in dating is defined by these, you've got the purple graph and you've got the green, or the purple spike and you've got the green spike. So that just kind of gives you an indication. But we can see here that the earliest one, Meltwater Pulse 1A, look right here. We would take 12 up, 12 falls. It was pretty much right between these two peaks. So this is defining the range here. Now the dash line I'd also mention, solar insolation is this. This is the amount of solar energy that's being absorbed by the northern hemisphere, or by the ice sheets more specifically. On the bottom, that's age in thousands of years. And then over here on the left, you've got estimated discharge in cubic kilometers per year. All right, so here we've got the two meltwater spikes, Meltwater Pulse 1A and Meltwater Pulse 1B. And we can see down here the age in thousands of years right here. And up here on this side here, we've got the amount of solar energy available. We don't need to talk about that right now too much. This is the solar insolation curve in calories per square centimeter. But then over here, we've got the estimated discharge in cubic kilometers per year. And so notice we've got this spike up here. If we come across, we're at like 14,000 cubic kilometers per year. Now that's an awful lot of water melting from the ice sheets very, very fast and being dumped into the global oceans. And most of this water is being dumped into the North Atlantic. And this is going to be...
What was that quantity again? How much?
About 14,000 cubic kilometers of water per year.
How much, like in today's age?
It's minuscule compared to that. And we can talk about, we can look at some of the studies. They're actually being adjusted downwards because it was discovered that a lot of the assumed meltwater coming off of Greenland was actually refreezing and not discharging into the ocean. So we can look at that. It just literally within the last few months, that study was released. But to move on here, I want to just point out very quickly that there's a range of dates for these meltwater pulses, and they're pretty much indicated by the green spike and the purple spike. But the point is, again, if we flip this graph upside down and juxtapose it on the climate, the temperature change graph, you'll see how nicely these two spikes coincide with those two very fast warmings. And that's what I want people to be able to see, all right? Because we're coming at this scenario that we're reconstructing here from multiple points of view, from multiple angles, right, multiple impact proxies. So
basically, this would be a natural consequence of everything that you can measure and compare against.
When you're introducing that much heat energy into the system, when we see those massive temperature rises, yes, those are being associated with massive meltwater spikes, meltwater discharging off of the ice sheets.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect, yes. The question is what is driving that heat energy? And that's an important part of this whole discussion. We basically, very quickly, we looked at this, and what I want to show you is that, to remind you that the Dryas octopetala flower was found as far south, and remember, it's a cold-loving plant. It wants cold. It does not like the warm weather, right? So when the glaciers recede, the octopetala, the Dryas flower, follows it north. But what we see now is, where is the Dryas octopetala found? Well, it's found here at the very north point of Scandinavia, very as far north as you can get. And then you go across the Arctic Ocean here, the Norwegian Sea, you get to Spitsbergen, and that's the other place where it's now found. However, what was this first clue to these early researchers was it was found down here in mainland Germany, down here in southern Sweden, in Finland, in Denmark. One of the prominent sites right here, the Skane site right here in Denmark, that was where it was found. It's not there now, right?
It doesn't naturally grow at that
not
altitude.
now, but at one point it did. And this is when we go back to the Younger Dryas, yes, it was growing here. But it showed up quickly because during the Balling-Alarod warmth, it disappeared. And then it suddenly came back again, and that quick reappearance of Dryas octopetala is what gave its name to the Younger Dryas. And of course, if we say there's a Younger Dryas, the implication there is an older Dryas. We're going to look at that too, because the question is are they being driven by the same forcing factors? And probably the answer is yes, I would believe. Anyways, so we looked at that. Now, very briefly, just to get the larger scale context, here is your geological time scale as it is now accurately. This is like the most recent version of it, accurate. And I just, you've got all of this going back to the Archean, the Proterozoic, the Triassic, Jurassic. Remember Jurassic? Jurassic Park. Everybody's heard the term Jurassic now because dinosaurs, right? Cretaceous. We know the end Cretaceous here was a major asteroid impact and global catastrophe, wiped out the dinosaurs, caused an extreme change in global climate, and essentially ended, if we go up here, the Paleozoic, the era of old life, it ended suddenly, and the Mesozoic, or the era of middle life, began. And then the Mesozoic ended here. The Cenozoic is recent life. Okay, so we're in the period of recent life. At the end of the Mesozoic right here, that's when the dinosaurs died off, right? Now, if we come through the Cenozoic, the part we're looking at here in this study of the Younger Dryas, right up here, see this little narrow slice up here, Mike? That's the Holocene. Now, this is not even correct because the Holocene, if you put it proportionally here to the Pleistocene, you wouldn't even see it. Pleistocene, remember, 2.5 million years. Holocene, 11,000 years. So here's the question that we is kind of hovering over this whole discussion. Is the Holocene a true new epoch, or is it truly an interglacial? I mean, is it truly a glacial? Is it truly a non-glacial age, or is it really just an interglacial between rapid expansions and return of the ice sheets? That's an important question. And for a while, back in the 1970s, it was believed that it was possibly that was what was going on. Anyway, so now you can get this perspective of the period we're looking at is just minuscule within the whole realm of Earth history as represented in this in this chart right here. So just to give context that, I want people to be able to see this, that we're talking about the transition from the Pleistocene to the Holocene. That's defined and marked by the Younger Dryas, okay? So if we go back to the late glacial maximum, the Western Hemisphere, North America, looked something like this. So I want people to learn to differentiate between the two ice sheets in North America. One is the Laurentide ice sheet, which was the big one, roughly about the same size as the ice sheet that now covers Antarctica. And then you had the Cordilleran ice sheet over here, which is mostly over the western mountains and up into Alaska, as you see here. It's roughly, but probably a little larger or more massive than the ice sheet now over Greenland. So think of this. When the Ice Age ended and the great ice sheets, and we haven't even talked about the one over northwestern Europe yet, which we called the Fennoscandian, right? But if we're talking here about the disappearance of this ice during the late glacial period, well, we're talking about as much ice as there is now on Earth, basically. We're talking about melting away amount of ice that's actually more than Antarctica and Greenland put together. Got to keep these things in context. Here's another sort of oversimplified model that I made here just to help clarify. And here I tried to show that there were actually two separate accumulation domes on the Laurentide ice sheet, one to the east of Hudson Bay and one to the west of Hudson Bay. There was also this defined trough between the Cordilleran and the Laurentide ice sheets. Now, this trough opened and closed, it seems, on occasion, that had to do with the rapid melting of the ice sheets. So if the ice sheets are melting, that means they're getting smaller in size. So during that the Balling Allerod warmth, Allerod warmth, the ice sheets would have shrunk. Well, that shrinking, as you can see here, Mike, would have opened up this this zone between the two ice sheets. And that is where it was assumed for many years that this was the interglacial corridor, the ice-free corridor through which Siberians who came across the Bering Land Bridge were able to migrate southward down into unglaciated North America.
What kind of a trip would that have been for a human being?
Oh, my God, what a trip that would have been. That would have been, yeah.
Can you imagine?
I have tried to imagine. It would definitely be an epic journey, no doubt. I mean, you're going down this huge trough, and on both sides it's flanked by these massive ice sheets. And what would the land in between have been? To me, it would have had to have been marshy, boggy, melting permafrost. How do you even traverse a landscape like that? I don't know. But
and of course sustain yourself with food and you know.
Right, unless of course you had animals migrating as well. But to me, that whole question of migration from Siberia across and down the ice-free corridor is definitely has unresolved issues.
Yeah.
So getting that in context, what else do we need to say about this? I guess we've covered that. There's one thing that's a very brazen mistake on this map. This shows the modern coastline.
Oh, okay.
Right? When you had roughly 6 million cubic miles of ice piled up on the continents, sea levels were 400 feet or so lower. Well, the coastlines wouldn't have looked like this. The coastlines would have been quite a bit different. And I didn't show that on there. I was mostly interested in just showing the amount of ice relative to the world we inhabit now. But that we have, actually, do I have it on the next one? No, I don't. But we do have, I've got some great graphics showing global sea level 350 feet lower than now. So even at 350 feet, you can see the dramatic difference in the shape and outline of the continents.
I would imagine.
Yeah. And even
That
so,
would be
350, that's
interesting
going to be conservative. I mean, there's actually some evidence that suggests that the sea level may have dropped 425 feet or even more. So this is just mostly review and context. So if you watch this, hopefully at least once, then what you've seen already in the pilot episode, and if you watch this actually several times, which you are able to do, you can pretty much get all of this clear. I want this to be well pictured in your mind. The correlation of these graphs, the process of the ice sheets rapidly melting, the process of the sea levels rapidly rising, but not uniformly in these great spikes, that the spikes define that Younger Dryas episode. So ultimately what we're going to do here is we're going to trace through the research. We're going to go back to some of the very early stuff and in the important milestones along the discovery of where we are now in terms of our understanding of the Younger Dryas, because ultimately I think the point of this is that at this stage we're still arguing about what caused the Younger Dryas. But it had to have a cause. There had to be some trigger mechanism. There had to be some forcing mechanism, to use the scientific term. It didn't just happen. I don't think we can attribute the Younger Dryas to just some natural internal climatic process that it changed, and a lot of the discussions about it essentially just almost says, well, it's a natural part of climate change, and we don't really need to try to define or get to some specific triggering mechanism. I don't believe that. I don't believe in the small cause, like Sir Fred Hoyle. I don't believe in the small cause triggering mechanisms. I think that to see huge effects like we're seeing, we need to look at some type of a huge forcing mechanism and make damn sure that it's not something either internal, external, or a combination of both that's driving this. And I think ultimately the scenario that we're going to be laying out, Mike, is that it is a combination of both. External or exogenic being the term, or internal to the Earth system and climate system itself, which we use the term endogenic. So exo, outside, endo, within. And I think that, yes, we can now argue that there is a strong connection and interconnectedness between the external and the internal.
Do you think by the end of this series we'll actually discover the cause of the Younger Dryas?
Well, it depends. I don't know. I'm not going to make any audacious claims like that, but I think we are going to be honing in on.
Well, we have a lot of smart people in the audience, and some of these people might have theories and other things to contribute along the way, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, well, we're going to be looking at the evidence all the way through, up to what I consider a pivotal year, 2007. Just like I consider 1980 a pivotal year, because that's the year that, for whatever coincidence, 3 independent teams all proposed that the dinosaur extinction was ultimately triggered by something from outer space, i.e. some kind of a bolide. Three independent teams all came forward in 1980. Why? Because it had the level of research and understanding had gotten to that point where it was ready for a major breakthrough. And the breakthrough came in the form of a layer of iridium that was discovered at the Cretaceous, as it was then called, tertiary boundary in Italy. Turning point in the question of the modern climatic and environmental changes and mass extinction event that occurred. Pivotal year, I put it 2007, with the publication of the West Kennett Firestone et al. Paper. And we will be, of course, looking at that paper, which introduced the idea of a extraterrestrial impact, which was immediately very controversial. So, and that's the part, the exciting part that we're going to be moving forward towards.
Please note, a glossary of terms is now available. See the download link in the description. We'll update this often.
You know, would certainly, and the reason I'm introducing this stuff, the terms, the Cordilleran ice sheet, the Laurentide ice sheet, that those are things, physical things. Those are the names of the ice sheets themselves. But now we also have a term that implies the time range during which these ice sheets existed. And in the Western Hemisphere, North America at least, that's the Wisconsin Ice Age. Again, we're going to be breaking this down more, and hopefully people will rewatch some of the videos that are introducing a lot of new concepts and terms, so it will facilitate. The assumption, yes, Mike, will be that when we get a little further into it, you've done the preliminary. You've learned the terms. We looked at the maps. You've got a picture in your head, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel for every segment. And if you're finding yourself floundering or lost, what was that term? Well, go back and rewatch. Because, again, this is about, of course, being entertained, because this is a very entertaining subject. But really, ultimately, it's about getting educated so people can have a realistic understanding, a realistic conversation about these ideas, these concepts, these events, and also to be able to, say, reevaluate things that are coming across, particularly sensationalized stuff that's coming across through mainstream media, that people are oftentimes getting swayed by the propaganda about climate change and environmental change, but have no context in which to understand the specifics of these propagandistic claims that are being made about a climate crisis. Yeah. Think of it this way. Right now, what has happened is because the politicization of science has taken place. So now science is looked at as this exclusive elite realm of the expert. So if somebody comes along and asks questions that are in any way challenging, or makes claims or assertions, or presents a hypothesis that is in any way contradictory to the created mainstream narrative, well, then what happens is you have the cult of science, the experts, who typically oftentimes are invoked without actually being specifically named. The experts say this and that, we're in the midst of a climate crisis. Oh, well, okay, who are we to question the experts? Well, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in the exclusivity of science. What we're doing here, Mike, is, I hope, a small exercise in the democratization of science. That you don't have to be a member of a highfalutin academic institution to have realistic knowledge about specific subject matter, right? If you're reasonably intelligent and reasonably committed to learning, yes, you can have a valid opinion on matters of science that are now consigned exclusively to the domain of the politically recognized expert. And on that note, I think that's a good point, point at which we can bid everyone adieu and look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Squaring the Circle, Unpacking the Younger Dryas series.
All right. Thank you, Randall. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, Mike.